take, especially documentaries, take a long time. So some of the people up here we interviewed maybe 4 or 5 years ago from the release of the movie. And so I wanted to sort of see if anything has changed in the world of comics in the last 4 or 5 years since we sort of interviewed you guys, and really since the movie came out, which was last year. How much the landscape has changed in terms of newspapers and online and creative. Anyway, so I'll put that to our panel as the beginning. Anybody can take that along with Dave Kellett here to my right is also a cartoonist and can also throw his 2 cents in.
Well, let's start on the far end with Karl and work toward this way. Interestingly, it's worth noting that so many of you have started jumping in more and more to the comic book world. But just in the broader landscape, Karl, for you, since we sat down with you, I think 3 years ago, what's different both personally and professionally for you? Not personally, but personally in terms of your own creative work.
I have 2 children now. No, what I was thinking was that when I talked to you guys, it was at the New England Webcomics Weekend, which I don't think they've done for the last few years, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest difference for me, at least off the top of my head, is that the lines have really blurred between webcomics as they were and comics. I think everything's just comics now, right? Which we all knew was inevitable and is amazing. But it's been cool to see all those people come up and just sort of become the new mainstream, if you will. I think that's accurate, right? I mean, I guess in my case, I started in mainstream comics, like 20 years ago, and I branched out to do my own thing, creator-owned stuff, published on the web in 2006 or 7, and I kind of got involved in that, self-publishing, and I became kind of addicted to it. And it's only been recently that I put that on hiatus to do some corporate stuff, but the circumstances were good enough that I thought it was worth doing. I haven't left anything behind. I think it's easier for me to balance the 2 things and not feel like I'm dividing my attention as much.
Yeah, that's fair. How about you, Ryan? What's different both on the landscape or for you in your own career?
My personal life?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's just go into that.
I'm glad you went from I guess left to right from my perspective, because I get to talk about the major change has been in micropatronage, which didn't exist at this time. And it was interesting to see the big guys talking about how the donation platform was unreliable. And what micropatronage is basically saying, I'll give this cartoonist $1 a month because I like the comic book. It's a little perks, Kickstarter style, like I'll see comics before they're finished, stuff like that. And that transforms that charitable instinct that used to be semi-random into this more reliable, every month I can expect to get X amount of dollars just from people being nice and supporting me. And it's this weird, great way to sort of sidestep the need for merchandise in some places. Some people have enough t-shirts already and don't want another one, even if it's a really hilarious t-shirt. But now they can just give you money. And it's amazing it took us so long to come up with this idea. Why don't we let people give cartoonists money? But it captures the semantics of Kickstarter's people making things happen through wanting it to happen a lot on an ongoing basis. And I feel like that is a very powerful thing for cartoonists who want to do their work and want to focus on the art and not be business people, I should say. This is one way they can do that.
Right, just curious in this room, how many people have heard of Patreon?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about.
Scott, how about you in terms, you sort of pioneered the idea of micropayments, I think. I mean, that was your first
years ago. This is not something I choose to claim off. Back in the Jurassic era. Now, it's funny when you ask, like, well, what's changed since the movie? All I could think was, I'm not sure I changed my shirt. I think I'm wearing the same shirt. what's funny is I went into my hobbit hole and started working on a graphic novel, and I went back to print. So I'm in this weird place where I really isolated myself from the scene pretty dramatically. And partially because I had tried some things that failed spectacularly. But I also had this sort of generalized faith that people would work things out, that you can't have tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of artists all trying to somehow make it work on the web without innovative solutions finding their way and one or two key ideas like micro-patronage catching on. The thing you're referring to, for those who weren't alive when dinosaurs roamed the earth, is that is that I was one of the early boosters of what we were calling micropayments. Basically, at its simplest, it's just some way, some simple way, some common currency, so that if a reader really likes it, they can just put a dime in your pocket, a quarter in your pocket. But the big idea behind it was the simple fact that in the traditional physical media, like printed books, and this is still true, if a reader spends $1, it somehow magically gets turned into a dime at best by the time it reaches the artist. And when you reverse that equation and the dollar becomes 90 cents, 85 cents, what is it on Patreon?
It depends.
It depends. Okay, all right, they need to work on that. But but still, what you have is you have this superpowered consumer, the superpowered reader, who has the ability, even in modest numbers, like a few thousand, to really make a difference in the financial life of the creator. It's simply paying for the work itself. Now we still. Well, no, that's something, I was about to go off in the weeds, but yeah, that's the thing. So that still exists, the idea of the power of the consumer when their money actually can make it across the transom without being decimated. The actual definition of decimated, by the way. That can be a real sea change. So we are starting to see that, and I do think that the advent of Patreon and maybe other services like it, hopefully, is pretty significant for that.
And Jeph, how about you?
In addition to all the really good points that these guys have made, the biggest change that I've seen is the level of quality has gone up dramatically. I mean, it's always, as long as I've been doing this, I started back in 2003. The level of quality for entering webcomics has always been on an upward trend, but it's this crazy scenario nowadays where you get these incredibly talented kids straight out of art school or animation school, or kids who are professional level artists at 18, and instead of graduating and trying to get a job in animation, they graduate, and while they're applying at animation companies, they start their webcomic, because that's what you do now, right? If you can draw, you do a webcomic. And so we're seeing all of these brand new comics by people who are babies, that are better drawn than I can do now, and I've been doing it for 13 years. So it's this crazy ramping up in quality that I think has been really amazing to watch. And now we're seeing this starting to trickle into mainstream work as well. These people are getting picked up by major publishers straight out of school, straight out of their first comic. You have somebody like Noelle Stevenson, who went from doing her comic Nimona to she's writing Thor now, right? Or Lady Thor, or something crazy like that.
It's Lady Thor.
Yeah.
Dave, do you want to chime in as well, as a cartoonist? What has changed for you in the last?
Oh, I hadn't prepared an answer. Yes. No, I think the idea of Patreon, not to keep hitting on the same button, but is really empowering for an artist, because for so many of us who try to make a living and make a living online, you didn't realize until you didn't have to do it anymore how sapping of energy it is to make an item based on your work, and to market that, and to ideate that, and to make it work as a T-shirt or as a book or as this or as that. But the empowering factor of just being able to do the work itself and make a living from that has been, it's almost stopped me in my tracks in terms of oh, I can really just be a cartoonist, and that's an incredibly joyful feeling. And I mean that in the most sincere way of saying joy-filled feeling. It's lovely to just do work and get an income from that. And so much so that in the last 6 months, I've completely changed the way I'm going to go forward the next 5 years. So I'm very excited about that personally, and I think it's really empowering for us as artists and for the entire industry. And then the other thing I would say too, to echo Jeff's thought, is that I'm noticing more and more that the sudden appearance on the scene of somebody super talented is kind of the side effect of this wonderfully siloing effect of artists. Someone could be amazing in Norway that you've never heard of, and then all it takes is a link, one link, when they're already 300 or 400 comics into their archives. And suddenly this amazing artist that completely siloed away from you is now opened up to you. And it would have taken 20 years of their career to break into the US market, and you're suddenly aware of them. And I find that with, I might have the title wrong, but Stand Still, Stand Silent, or Stay Silent. Have you guys seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, amazing art, and I think it's out of Scandinavia. Did I say the title wrong? Finland, sorry. But just completely unaware to me personally, and I'm finding that more and more with comics. So, anyway.
As a sort of follow-up to that, how many people on the panel still work with traditional media? Does anybody still use paper and pencil?
I still use paper and pencils and brushes for the webcomic. And it's only, I do everything else in digital, but I only use those tools for webcomics still because, two reasons. One, I like that they're all in a big binder full of art. And also, I just get textures out of those brushes and I could probably get digitally, but I haven't figured out how to do that. But I also enjoy it, and it's kind of exercising two different.
I'm your antimatter opposite, because I use completely digital for everything, even the layouts, even the sketches, everything. And then it lands on paper. Right now, the latest stuff.
And you do both, right?
Yeah, so I do a sci-fi script that's entirely digital, just because the tricks that you can pull digitally, I think, are so much more amazing, especially for a sci-fi script that's very apt. But I do sort of a gag strip that I still like to draw by pencil and paper, because for me, there's still a certain zen quality that can't be quantified that I love just of pen on paper. And it's stupid, I know, but it's very meditative for me to draw that way. It's very relaxing. In a way that a Cintiq isn't. I don't know how to explain that to someone that might not draw.
It makes you look like a cartoonist. Like I have people say, oh, can I come and photograph you at work? And I'm like, it's me at a computer. You're going to see me sitting at a computer. It's not worth photographing. I don't have to clean up the office. You don't want to see it.
You just forward them like an iStock photo of just some guy at the computer. Here you go. Here's me. Here's me at work.
I had this one reviewer that wanted me to take a photo of myself at my desk. So it's just me, turning around like, oh, I didn't hear you come in. And my screens have other people's comics displayed because they're nice to look at. So it's not a text file or anything.
We need to get you a clear plastic medallion that says Getty Images.
I don't have any images for comic plus dinosaur.
The other thing I'm curious about with the panel and also with the audience is, is anybody getting comics from newspapers anymore?
Two.
No, there's 5 or 6.
Wow.
So that ship has really sailed for most people. That's interesting. It's funny because I picked up a newspaper the other day in an airport of all things, and I realized how foreign it felt to flip to the funny pages. I grew up with that.
I get super mad because I feel like it's like you mentioned in the documentary, where you have to appeal to everyone, including old people and literal babies. And so you end up with these very safe comics. And I read these scripts, and it takes effort.
Except for Mark Trail.
Yeah, there's some great ones. There's some great ones. They're terrific comics, but there are also 5 or 6 that have been phoning it in. And I always feel like I want to grab a pencil and sort of you need to push this a bit. You need to start appealing to.
Have you thought about doing that as a strip? Ryan's Notes?
Ryan just blows up any relationship you would ever have with him. I'm solicitally editing their script. He's like, yeah, I think about it all the time.
That's a great career move. Jim Davis sending you a horse head in your head.
Jim Davis would be cool.
Jim Davis, by the way, as an interview subject, as a person, was it one thing this film did for me is it gave me a complete 180 on Kathy Geiswick for watching. She is awesome. If a younger unmarried Dave Kellett could meet a younger unmarried Kathy Geiswick, they would be magic. It would be amazing. But that sounds creepier than I intended. I'm going to take that back. I'm immediately take that back. But Jim Davis is awesome. And I just want to stop for 1 second and share one brief Jim Davis story. So there's a huge complex in the middle of Muncie, Indiana, out in the middle of nowhere, in a soy and cornfield called Pause. That's Jim Davis's facility for producing all of Garfield stuff. And it's 65 employees. And at one point, he's given us a tour, and he takes us upstairs to a room, and maybe Fred can correct me, it might be twice the size of this room, you think?
It was pretty big.
It was pretty big. It's maybe twice the size of this room. And it's all the Garfield products, right? Everything. And I look to him and I go, wow, Jim, this is amazing to have every single Garfield product ever produced in one room. This is bitchin'. And he kind of goes, oh, David. And puts his hand on my shoulder. He's like, this is just this year. And so...
Can you show me the Scrooge McDuck money?
Dives around and then throws the coins up on his head.
Anyway, so that's my one good Jim Davis story from making the film. But so, in the sort of time of change that we're in, this might be a fun question to ask the panel, is what do you now forecast going forward for your own careers, as best you can guesstimate, the next 5 years, 10 years? How will you work? What will your money be made in terms of how, like, will it be in book publishing? Will it be through Patreon? How do you foresee it going? You want to jump in?
I guess I'll start. Patreon was a big shift for me. Like I used to make half of my income through merchandise and half of it through advertising. Patreon came in and completely reshuffled that. So it's not the majority of my income, but it's a significant portion of it now. So assuming Patreon keeps going the way it's going, I see that kind of becoming the de facto thing for people starting out, and definitely something we'll kind of rely on. For me, the last 5 years has all been about like diversifying, doing more different things, both in terms of my work and monetizing my work, so that I'm not as reliant on any one stream to support myself. So I think, especially now that I've got a new comic strip that I'm doing alongside questionable content, I think it's going to be more of that, just trying to do different stuff, explore different avenues. You know, maybe talk to an actual, dead tree publisher about putting out an Alice Grove book someday. Who knows?
Right.
So.
Scott, how about you?
Well, for the next couple of years, I know exactly what I'm doing because I'm doing another nonfiction book. So I'm still kind of in the bubble. It's weird. It's like, the print industry for me is, I just feel like, it's Wile E. Coyote. It just ran off the cliff, and it's just been hanging there for 5 years, and still hasn't looked down and started falling. So it's very weird. I'm in a very, very weird place, considering how fiercely I was obsessed with digital comics for many years. But right now I'm kind of just obsessed with comics. That never really changed, I guess.
Yeah.
And for me, it's all about seeing all these different things that comics can do. And at the moment, I'm able to continue to explore certain creative possibilities and leave behind the whole question of how do we make a living, because it doesn't apply to me right now in this current relationship with this publisher. And for whatever reason, for lots of dull earthly reasons, I'm okay. So I'm not constantly thinking about how I need to completely reinvent the way I make my money. It's just like, no, I need to make my comic. That was taken care of a while ago. But Patreon, just to go back a moment, Patreon I think is very significant for a couple of reasons that you said, but it's something that we need to stop and really consider. And that's the fact that what we're seeing is a reinvention of the idea that your income is entirely tied to your audience. You got you got 100 readers, maybe you can buy a pizza once a week. You got 1,000 readers, maybe you can pay your cable bill, or well, no, that's actually not as much as pizza, but you know what I mean. You got 10,000 readers, then now it's a significant little side job or something like that. You get 100,000 readers, now you've got an actual middle class existence. Potentially. These things are, my math is terrible, I'm just sort of backwards engineering the math, and those were awful examples, but you know what I mean? The point is, it's just a ramp, right? Make the comic, make something that people care about, And there's a natural correlation to your ability to make a living. And that is a change from those early days, the early growing pains, where it was like, yeah, but what kind of comic is it? Is it the sort of thing that would work with merchandise? If you're doing something about, you know, like the life of Anne Frank or something, it's not really going to work that way. But now this thing is more adaptable to just whatever kind of story you want to make, whatever kind of experience you want to make. Maybe you want to make something, the kind of experience where the whole comic just sort of takes over the screen and you eliminate distractions and people can enjoy a good long-form comic, which is the sort of thing I was always interested in. That never worked when it came to merchandising and advertising, because you have to have all the distractions, you have to have all the blinking banners and the mugs, and it's just, you have to have a particular kind of comic. We're moving into a world potentially, if micropatronage really stays, really sticks, where it's just a matter of, can I create something that people care enough about to read? And then I can watch as that supports me a little bit more with each new reader. That's how it always should have worked. And then you can just draw. You can just concentrate on the art, which is all I ever really wanted from those early days of Revolution.
Ryan, how about you?
That's a really perfect answer that I have to follow. What's the question? Where are you going to be in 5 years?
Well, yeah, just in terms of like in this time of change, Ryan.
Yes.
No, just given the landscape and how you see your next 5 years, your next 10 years, how it might net out.
I have no idea. It's interesting because I'm doing 5 years ago. I was even doing Adventure Time, and then I get this email from my editor Shannon, who grew up in high school reading dinosaur comics, and she needed writing for Adventure Time, and she already knew from my comics what kind of jokes I could tell. She said, "Oh, do you want this job?" Which is a very nice email to get. And I said, "Sure, I'll do that." And then I'm writing Adventure Time. And it's like a really boring origin story, but it just happens that she had read my comic for 10 years and liked it. And then this opportunity comes, and now I'm doing Squirrel Girl, which again, I got an email saying, "Do you want to write Squirrel Girl?" And I said, "I don't want to write Squirrel Girl." And I took a weekend to think about it and read about the character. I'm like, I really want to write Squirrel Girl. I so much want to write Squirrel Girl. So it became this whatever, I don't even call it career, this life is taking advantage of things when they land in your lap, I guess, and running with them. And I don't know what email I'm going to get a year from now saying, "Do you want to write this?" This makes it sound like this lackadaisical existence I live, where I'm just waiting people to ask me to do stuff for money, and I say, "Sure." But it comes from having an online presence where people, like, you look at an online comic as this is you practicing getting better every day. This is you entertaining people and building an audience. And this is a really entertaining resume you're putting out for editors who can read it every day for 10 years and then have your name in their mind when they want to think of something. So for me, dinosaur comics is the main thing that's most important to me, and I love it. And other stuff, so I'll do that on the side, do that on the side. And then I'm like, I'm doing a Marvel comic on the side, I guess. But it's nice because most people who want to write for Marvel or want to write for DC, that becomes their career goal. Like, I want to do this. And for me, it's like, yeah, I guess it'll be fine. But it's not, I'm not beholden to them, and I'm always ready to walk away. And be like, you know what, this is sucky, I'm out now. So it makes you feel sort of powerful to not care what Marvel Disney thinks. I was talking to Jeph about that. I was doing Howard the Duck, and we were saying, yeah, it was nice that we don't have to worry about this gig being our paycheck. And so we're still self-supported, but we get to do this fun stuff with these, 60-year-old characters, and have it be canon, and get to write words for Spider-Man when he cries all the time.
Who doesn't love crying Spider-Man? Karl.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's definitely a fearlessness that comes from having a few years under your belt of producing work that people trust and like. My goal was always to produce a graphic novel a year. Like, it was always that kind of Tenapel. That model where he'll just pick an idea and he'll do the thing and then come out that year and then he'll do a completely different thing the next year. And I thought, that sounds amazing. You work on that for 6 to 8 months, you publish Now I think my goal is just tell a different story every year. I don't even care what the medium is. I mean, like, I like comics, I love comics, I've been doing comics for a bunch of years. Like, I'd like to explore, this has nothing to do with this panel, but I mean, personally, I'd like to explore different mediums of storytelling. That's what ultimately I'd like to do. I'd like to make games that have different, explore the themes that I'm interested in, or something music related or whatever. But in terms of business, I think what I would probably do in the next 5 years is I'll probably do the graphic novel year thing. I'll probably do it through monthly issues with Image, and then collect them into print. And I would probably, I'm talking about how feasible this is, but I'll probably just post the pages online as I do, like a webcomic, because I don't think there are any rules against that, are there? I mean, if you're doing an Image comic, I think you can pretty much do whatever you want. You're kind of running that business. So it's like doing a webcomic, but I'd still be getting, I think you can negotiate a page rate through an Image, and you still own everything. And it really seems like having to take a medium too kind of scenario. And that's likely what I will end up doing, probably very soon.
I like cake. Cake is always a good thing. Should we open it up to the...
Yeah, I was going to say, before we wrap it up for the day, we'll open it up to the audience for any questions you might have for any individual panelists or the panel as a whole. And since we know, wow, Mr. Enthusiasm over there, fantastic.
Question for Fred and Dave. So you got a chance to talk to Bill Larson, and
he said he loves you, by the way.
well, maybe not after he hears this question. We're all here because we're fans of strips, and a lot of us are fans of Bill Larson and Kellett and Hobbs. But what are his thoughts? I mean, did you get a chance to ask him about the webcomics that people have been making about the continuation of Kellett and Hobbs?
Well, fortunately, behind the screen, Bill,
Brian has been Bill the whole time.
That's a urban legend that is going around for a while. That Bill was secretly doing a popular webcomic. I forgot about that.
Yeah. That comic was Achewood. No, so he is not a fan, probably is the shortest way to put that, but not in a necessarily mean way. In the same way that all artists recognize that we all started by copying other people's work, for example. Like I remember tracing whatever it was, As far as maybe more specifically the ones that are like creepily making them older or putting them like, here it is 10 years later kind of thing. Is that the ones you're talking about? Yeah, I think in general, he rightfully has a sense of ownership of it and is not super excited about it, but not in a mean way,
Yeah, I think he would prefer it just wasn't mentioned in that way. I guess that's the way.
Yeah, I think we honestly don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it's the best way to say it is like Calvin exists the way he wanted it to exist, and that's the way he would like it to be read. And I think that's absolutely fair, by the way. I think all of us would want our work to be, read as it was created. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so I guess you went north visit when you do an comment about slash fiction.
It's funny. I haven't seen like of my characters, but I have seen people sending me pictures of dinosaurs doing adult activities. I feel no sense of ownership towards it, but again, I guess I didn't want to see this right now. So, but you don't need to show me.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, Jim Davis has been very embracive of all, embracing
Garfield minus Garfield.
Yeah,
Garfield minus Garfield, for example. He went out of his way to be cool about it and to actually help the book be published, which I thought.
Well, he published the book.
Yeah.
Can we just make this a Jim Davis love fest? Because I gave a talk in Muncie. He is the sweetest guy. He came, we talked for a little while, and he's just very open-minded and sweet and great, just really nice. He's a really nice guy. He gets knocked around a lot, by snooty, pretentious jerks like me and all. But I I really like Jim Davis.
I really did too, and I think if you look at, I think that it's hard to, because people want to judge Jim's career in Bill Watterson's prism or vice versa, you know.
Yeah.
And if you look at Jim, say, in in a Walt Disney vein, you understand what that career is a little better, you know, and that's okay. Not everybody has to produce the same comic strip. So anyway, but more questions. Yes.
Does Jim Davis hate Mondays? No, actually, I'm kind of wondering, like, is he the end of this era of super commercialized, super style comic guy?
Have you heard of Homestuck?
Has your mom heard of Homestuck, though?
There's still Peanut stuff out there, there's still the Garfield stuff out there, and they'll probably be out there 20 years from now. Is there a way to get to that level?
Carol, any thoughts, Charlie? Will that ever happen
on
again?
that level? I mean, like, you know, Ali Barash and, you know, you mentioned Homestuck and, you know, the Penny Arcade guys. I mean, like,
It's huge.
I mean, okay, in pure numbers, Jim's probably got, you know, got a record that's going to stand for a good long time, but the idea of the mass market phenomenon, the person like showing up on the Today Show or topping New York Times for 50 weeks in a row or whatever, I mean, like that, we're kind of very close to that already. What's interesting now is that Jim was one of the people, along with Charles Schultz and a dozen other people over the course of like 40 years, who went down the same track and performed spectacularly well, who became quite wealthy, doing exactly the same thing as the other guys. Not creatively, but in terms of a business model. What we see now is we see a few dozen people, every single one of whom has completely reinvented the definition of success for themselves, who become successful as this category of one. You know, and this is what's happening now in comics, is you make it and tell everybody, and then you figure out, okay, what kind of a success am I going to be? And it's very little comparison between these people, even internet superstars. I mean, like, you know, Randall Monroe is not like Gabe and Tycho, is not like Andrew Hussey. I mean, it's not like Ali Brosh. These are all very, very different people with different kinds of success. All they did was they just got enough eyeballs and saw what that added up to.
And I think it also kind of mirrors the increasing granulation of culture. You know, nowadays you might actually see some random Twitter comedian show up on Conan O'Brien, and 98% of Conan O'Brien's audience has no idea who this person is, but the 2% of people who do know that person is still like 400,000 people who just happen to tune in because they're like, oh, this person I follow on Twitter is going to be on Conan. That's really cool. And so we've never really had anything like that happen before, at least in my experience. So I think the granulization of our culture is also being reflected in the granulization of celebrity and how you define celebrity.
Yeah, Andy Warhol's 15 minutes is a little more prophetic.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is I personally feel like we will never, or it will be a very long time, we'll never have another Peanuts or another Garfield or even another Bloom County or Watterson in terms of that level of success. But the encouraging thing is, and it kind of echoes what Jeph was saying, is we will have more people who are successful, which is very different than it was 20 years ago when there was, say, 100, 150 people in comic strips, for example, making a living. I think you're probably going to start seeing in the next decade 300, 600, 1,000 people making a really great living in comics, most of whom you will never encounter or ever see. And that's what I meant about siloing, is that there will be whole careers and whole fandoms that you will never hear of, and they're making $200,000 a year.
And those success stories, as artists, will not have to deal with a form that's tremendously constricted, that forces them to not only to put it all in a little box, but to the point where you can chop off a third of it every Sunday, and they won't have 1,000 editors to please. You know, newspapers were a shotgun marriage. You know, the newspapers in the comics community, that was a shotgun marriage. That was in the beginning of the 20th century. Something came along where it seemed to work for both of them, and they stayed together even though they fucking hated each other. And it stayed that way for 90 years. And some amazing things got made. So, you know, they had some great kids. but they always hated each other. And I think that everyone will be happier that they're living their lives separately.
That's not amazing medical.
It's also just, it's impossible to predict the zeitgeist, Who thought the medium of radio would come back the way it has with podcasts, It seemed like a dead medium, or, Harry Potter books, how huge that, became.
People watching other people playing video games on YouTube.
Yeah, PewDiePie. I mean, how crazy is that? So I'm of the hope that the next huge, successful, whatever that is, if that is monetary success or if it's just diffusing into the culture the way that Garfield has, can come from anywhere. It's unpredictable what will catch fire.
But even, sorry to keep going on this, but Raina's books, Smile and Drama, just a continuing run on the New York Times bestseller list.
Or Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Or Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
She's
Or
the top 4 books on the...
Yeah, this week.
This week.
Is she really?
The top 4 books, she's all of them.
Yeah.
God, I hope she is walking around her house just high-fiving herself all day long. Like, just like, oh man, Raina, let's make a sandwich. Oh, this is great. Next question. Oh, we should wrap it up. We'll do one last question. And it's got to be the best question in the world. Oh, don't raise your hand if it's not. There it is over there. Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
A central but sort of unstated premise of the movie, the documentary, was that webcomics are basically the era of newspaper comics with a sort of unstated contrast to comic books. And I was wondering about why you thought that was. And it seems to be characteristic of, I believe, both questionable content and dinosaur comics. They've got that gag-a-day format. So just wanted to comment on that relationship, basically.
Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'll start out by saying I agree that I don't want to speak for Ryan, but I definitely come from the newspapers here at school. That is what I grew up reading and emulating and all of that, so that's very much my thing. I think one of the reasons it may have come across as kind of favoring the newspaper-style strips in this documentary is that up until, I won't say the last year or two, it was really hard to make a living doing a long-form comic on the internet. But nowadays, we're seeing strips that are strictly long-form, page a day, page a week, sort of things, becoming very successful, very popular, very profitable for the readers. Part of that is to Patreon. Part of that is that I think we may have just sort of hit a critical mass where there are enough eyeballs looking for that stuff on the internet now that it's becoming more viable. But yeah, I don't know, personal anecdote, I didn't know what the comic Gunner Creek Court was when I interviewed for this film, and now it's maybe my favorite comic strip on the internet, and it's a long form.
I'm sitting right here. I said I'm sitting right here.
No, I said music.
I don't know how hopes on that,
Sorry, I didn't mean to kill your energy with that bad joke. Anybody else?
Maybe my second favorite.
Yeah, well, just to add to that, long form is where I live. And maybe one of the reasons why I was taking a break, which in McCloud years means disappearing for 10 years, is because, I felt that long form was an unsolved problem. And there were things that favored short form, that favored, 3 gags a week or 5 or whatever, even with something that had sort of quasi-long form thing like questionable content. And it is true that when you start moving into more patronage model, you have the potential for a broader variety of things, including just long form, like the equivalent of graphic novels, online, things like Gunner Creek. And so, I don't know, I'm watching this. Guys like me, we've been on the sidelines a bit, just thinking, no, this isn't quite hospitable for what we do yet, but now we're seeing, okay, maybe Haley's comment is finally coming around a bit.
Yeah. Ryan, Karl, you want to jump in on that one? Because I actually think Karl's answers over the last 2 answered that best, which is that so many lines are blurring, really, which is kind of what the summary book